So this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of talk for me. I guess I have to express at the beginning my appreciation to Saul and Biff for the opportunity to do a little self-reflection over the last few days and weeks as I prepared for this talk. So picture this. I'm on a plane somewhere between San Francisco and Australia, heading to the state of Victoria to do some advisory work on this kind of social dimension of innovation, what I call large-scale innovation. It's a long flight. I have something in my hand which is a bit out of character for me, which is a drink. And I have one of these little white cards, which is the infamous immigration card, which always has a line that baffles me, which is the line that is labeled occupation. Because as those of you who know me know, I can fill out that line many different ways, you know, teacher, entrepreneur, media guy, whatever. And this time, I think, partly because of the alcohol, I decided to, I didn't know about innovation junkie at the time. So I wrote the words innovation activist. You know, what the hell, right? And I went down from the airplane to immigration, where there was a central casting, big, rather mean-looking officer who took one look at my card and looked at me and looked at the card again, and said, after a long, uncomfortable silence, "So what's this then? Is this some kind of subversive activity?" And I was tempted to say yes. But I realized that I'd have, therefore, a really short visit to Australia in a very kind of circumscribed physical space. And so I said, look, you know, I'm here to do some advisory work for your government. You know, I showed him some documents, and he let me through. But that, in fact, is the reality of what I do. And the reason I'm telling that story is because I've been an innovation activist, in a sense, all my life. And the greatest pleasure I get is to work with people who are on the hot seat to deliver an innovation agenda, even if they can't even define what the word means, but they've been told somehow that it's really important. I also relate to the notion of innovation activist as someone who takes on projects, whether they be startups or social projects. And finally, I think about innovation activists through the lens of thinking about what innovation itself needs. I think that innovation wants something from us at this particular moment in history. You know, it's one of the most frequently used and frequently abused words in the language. It's important, and it also needs, in some respects, innovation itself. We need to bring innovation to innovation. So what I thought I'd talk about today is a little bit about, you know, how I came to be an innovation activist, what I learned en route on my journey, so to speak, and then what I'm doing now as a consequence of that learning and that progression in my career. So, in my non-linear non-career. So this is my rosebud moment. I'm 11 years old. I'm in my parents' house, obviously. I'm 11. And someone left this science fiction novel, which I picked up and read, and it really changed my life. I don't know if any of you have read The Voyage of the Space Beagle. Okay. Well, of course, Chris. I mean, you would know. So here's this interstellar space expedition, thousands of people, boldly going where no one has gone before. Actually, Gene Roddenberry was successfully sued by A.E. Van Vogt for appropriation of IP and won, I believe. But so picture the expedition, and at the last, they have all the traditional disciplines, you know, the chemists and the military people. And at the last minute, this guy from the Department of Nexialism shows up, a department of one, and he's scorned and ignored. But predictably, the bureaucrats and the functional discipline people get into trouble. And so the Nexialist, who has a combination of behavioral science, psychology, influence, communication, military and engineering and nerd skills, turns the whole dilemma around and saves the day. And I thought, well, gee, that's great. I'm going to become a Nexialist. And then I found out it didn't exist. So in some respects, I've had to invent that discipline for myself, right? So what I did was to set out and to find some rather unusual schools, some rather unusual places where I could, in some respects, learn what I felt to be the disciplines that would come together, the magic of the blend. Creativity coming from the magic of the blend was the take-home message of this science fiction novel, but it was the take-home message of everything else that followed. So at the same time, I was kind of a book omnivore. My parents had a bunch of Chinese philosophy books, and I came across the philosopher Zhuangzi, who was one of the avatars of Taoism. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is because you can have a big idea about what you want to do, but then you have to figure out how to do it. And so this was another very influential aha moment for me, because there's a famous story called The Dexterous Butcher. I don't know, it's pretty obscure, I guess, but it won't be obscure for much longer. And it's really interesting. So this royal guy is taking a horse ride through a village, and he sees a butcher. And the butcher has a big cleaver and is whacking away on the carcass of an ox. And the cleaver just magically goes exactly where it needs to go. The meat just falls off the bone, and he's never seen anything like it. So he talks to the butcher. He says, "What's going on?" And here's the quote from The Dexterous Butcher. "An awkward cook sharpens his knife every month. I've used this knife for 19 years, carving thousands of oxen. Still, the blade is as sharp as the first time it was lifted from the whetstone. At the joints, there are spaces, and the blade has no thickness. Entering with no thickness where there is space, the blade may move freely where it will. There's plenty of room to move. Thus, after 19 years, my knife remains as sharp as it was on the first day." So that was really amazing to me. Here's a apparent magic feat, the knife which gets sharper with every cut. And then the aha moment was, oh, I get it, 19 years of practice, right? And cultivating the progression from a random skill, which is just wielding a cleaver, to beginning to find the in-between spaces where there is no effort. Sharpening the perceptions, in other words, where opportunity awakens and where possibility is created. So, pretty heavy-duty thoughts for, pre-teenage kid in Long Island, suburban Long Island, who was thinking about how to wield his own cleaver at the same time. I grew up in Long Island, New York, with two Chinese immigrant academic parents. And so this was another school for me, because there was cognitive dissonance every day, right? So this is like late 50s Long Island, where you get a trophy just for showing up at soccer practice. And then I would go home, and if I got an A-, it would be a seismic event, a kind of a discussable, topic at the dinner table as to why I had only gotten an A-. So reconciling very different cultural frames of reference was therefore a really important and formative experience as well, because again, the magic was in the blend. Blending A. Van Vogt science fiction with Taoism, as another example. So the next school was music, or what musicians would call the College of Musical Knowledge. And, this is worth an hour by itself. I'll just summarize by saying that at the age of 18, having been a big fan of Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, are there any Zappa fans here? Okay, right. We know, right? So I got a chance to audition for him, and he invited me out to LA for 3 months to be basically his apprentice. So I went on the road with them, I recorded with them, I stayed at his house, I sat under his recording console while he mixed albums. And this was another magic is in the blend experience, because the thing that he said that has always stuck in my brain was, you can put any kind of music with any other kind of music as long as it has a 4/4 backbeat, right? So all about the mixing. And he never talked about himself as being in the music business. He said, I'm in the content business. I don't care if it's an album, a graphic design, a concert, a book. It's all the same to me. So he was really a cross-media, transmedia artist way ahead of his time, because we're talking about the late 60s right now. So again, another lesson in blending. And jazz became that lesson for me in spades, because jazz musicians talk about finding the sweet spot. And the sweet spot is the balancing point between the sheet music and the improvisation. It's kind of the difference between robot cello and soul cello in some respects, as I parse what we heard earlier this morning. And finding that sweet spot is not an algorithm. It's a sensibility. It's a human skill. It's a heuristic, right? So again, magic in the blend. And then, I went to some other schools. I went to medical school. I produced some movies in Hollywood. I was on the faculty at Harvard Business School for about 14 years, where I had 2,000 MBA students in my rogue second-year innovation and entrepreneurship course. So a lot of different experiences that kind of came together to form a point of view about innovation, about what innovation is all about. And every time I engaged in a new career episode, it was like peeling another layer of the onion, because Hollywood has had a systemic approach to innovation for, a good almost 100 years. It's a different culture from Harvard Business School, obviously, and so forth and so on. So it made me agnostic, and it made me open-minded, and it made me, I think, skeptical in a healthy kind of way. And so layer upon layer, this knowledge of innovation evolved for me. So what does this mean in terms of today? Obviously I've had a somewhat weird career. I've been pursuing this nexialist agenda. If you think about it, reading this book at 11, behavioral science, engineering, technology, et cetera, and I kind of touched all those bases in terms of arriving at today. So what does a nexialist do with all of that? Well, let me describe a few things that are up with me and see if this ignites any sparks on your side. Oh yeah, Silicon Valley, I forgot. I live in San Francisco, I'm advising startups, I'm instigating startups, so there's that kind of entrepreneurial meme as well. Well, so what am I doing? I'll tell you about three things. One is I started a few years ago an organization called Edge Makers, because I wanted to take an approach to innovation learning and make it shareable for young people, specifically K-12, because I felt, I had my own kids, I was hanging out with a lot of kids, and I thought, why do they have to wait until they get an MBA or until some adult tells them that they can become agents of change? Why not be subversive and put tools in their hands at a younger age? Why not? They're probably much more open-minded than graduate students at some distinguished East Coast business school, maybe. So this is just a snapshot of the curriculum. So you think about innovation. Innovation is really nothing more or less than the ability to originate, develop, and realize the value from ideas. Whether it's an innovative person, an innovative team, innovative organization, innovative country. And there is still tremendous confusion around what innovation is. If you take 10 CEOs and pin them up against the wall, you say, what is innovation? You'll probably get about 4.5 to 5 different answers. And sadly, the numbers might not be as forbidding, but the same phenomenon tends to apply when you talk with people who are self-proclaimed innovation experts. But it's really simple. You have to be able to generate ideas, you have to be able to develop them, and you have to take them to market. Plant, grow, harvest. So our framework is quite straightforward. You have ideation disciplines, you have disciplines that are about amplifying the power of ideas, which includes design thinking, narrative development, collaborative skills, EQ, all that stuff. And then entrepreneurship is really about how you take the ideas to market. So this is Edge Makers, right, which is now in the US, in Canada, in China, beginning in Mexico. We're blowing on the sparks because we're trying to create a prairie fire among the young. The second thing that's occupying my attention these days, and again, you can see how this is all about the magic of the blend, in a way, is we haven't decided what I'm called yet, so I'm intrigued by the notion of becoming an innovation architect, right, architecture, but it could be innovation curation. It was proposed I'd be the innovation editor-in-chief, but the World Economic Forum has something in San Francisco called the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which currently is about 2 buildings and 80 staff people who are pursuing 8 horizon areas of technology, blockchain, AI, precision medicine, autonomy, et cetera, with the idea of bending the curve of technology for human benefit. So this is about getting context and perspective on the runaway acceleration of innovation so that people like, the US Congress can wrap their heads around things like the internet, which is not, a collection of tubes, and it does have a business model, et cetera, but also corporate leaders as well. And so what's afoot now, and by the way, the forum, which is very much known for policy leadership, has made a significant investment in the whole notion of science, technology, and innovation, which is what the center is about. And there is now a proposal on the table, which I'm implicated in, which is to expand to this entire site in Fort Scott in the San Francisco Presidio, 22 buildings and 30 acres, which would represent one of the biggest concentrations of innovation-relevant capability in one place on the planet. So physical as well as virtual, obviously. And then the final thing I want to talk about and just mention is, and this is my pet project, is something I call the Innovation Cloud, which is basically a digital nervous system for innovation that can be relevant for an enterprise or for a community of practice, pulling people together to do the work of innovation, learn, and connect in either a synchronous or asynchronous kind of way. And the first deployment of this is actually happening at a conference in China next week. So this is current events. So that's a little bit of a snapshot then on what's going on now and how I, as a kind of a junior nexialist, kind of capitalized on the privilege I had to learn the things that I learned to combine them in ways that result in these kinds of projects, all of which are about the magic of the blend. So, this is about the magic of the blend. BIF and this conference are about the magic of collaboration. So I look forward to the opportunity to get your feedback because innovation is still in beta, in my opinion. We're about 5 minutes into the innovation movie, and having traveled a fairly long distance down that road, I'm eager to compare notes with all of you. So let's jam, let's improvise, let's talk about innovation, and in doing so, let's make sure that your cleavers are very sharp so that we can find those in-between spaces. Thank you very much.